Good evening, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and call the tentative budget meeting to order. John, if you could call the roll, please.
Altpeter? Here. Atkins?
Here.
Conant?
Here.
Crawford? Here. Darcy?
Here.
Goddard? Grant?
Here.
Hall? Harris?
Here.
Howard? Hovey?
Here.
Emmett? Josting?
Here.
Longfellow?
Here.
Mennel?
Here.
Mingus?
Here.
Harrell?
Here.
Rich Stinson? Roberts? Scortino? Sen?
Here.
Chairman Zimmerman?
Here. We have a quorum. We'll do business. If we could rise for the invocation and pledge, please.
Heavenly Father, thank you again for the opportunity to meet and go through this budget tonight. I know that we each have individual opinions. I pray that we can share those freely and in a civil manner, and then vote on this and come back together as one. I pray that everything that's said and done tonight will honor you. Thanks for our electeds and appointed officials, and just what a great job all of our employees do for us. They make our job much easier. Thank you for a successful harvest, Father, as it continues. I pray that you pray protection over the farmers. Pray for those board members that weren't able to be here tonight, that they will be missed. We know that you're a sovereign God, and we love you. In your name we pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Just a couple quick announcements before I turn it over to Finance Chair Graff. I forgot to mention this the other night. We've been approached by the EDC. There are two businesses in Tazewell County. One's a new business and one's a business that wants to expand, and they want to take advantage of the state CDBG process. It requires a public hearing on our part. There's job creation tied to that, but it comes from the state. But I just needed to know, just let me know over the next couple of days if you have any issues or questions on that. Secondly, UCCI has a fall program coming up in 2 weeks. I should have mentioned it earlier. It's Friday night the 22nd, and then the morning of the 23rd there's classes. That's down in Springfield. If you're interested in going, please let me know. Thirdly, the appellate or the auditor's lawsuit against me was tossed by the appellate court. So for the first time in 3.5 years, I'm not under a cloud of. And then lastly, I received a text this afternoon from Senator Dave Kaler that $5 million from the infrastructure package has been released to Tazewell County. So some good things are happening in Tazewell County. So with that, I will turn it over to Finance Chairman Grant.
Thanks, I think. That's good news. Double good news.
Don't look at me like everybody thinks I know what I'm doing, because I'm not. I know there's some first-time board members here, or first budget. Don't be afraid to ask questions. It's a learning process. Obviously, this is my first time as chairman. I hope it goes smoothly, but if I fail, follow me out. All right. So the first item on the agenda is the discussion of the FY22 budget overview. On your screen, you will see a document that's been was created by Tim Newhouser at my complaining to him. Because if you look at the budget book, you'll notice the general fund is about $4 million plus in the red. And when I first started on this board, that was a common theme. We'd start the year with $4 million, $5 million deficits and finish the year with a $4, $5, $6 million surplus. And I thought to myself, there's got to be a better way to do this. And we've moved down that path. So if you look at the general fund right now, you'll see a $4+ million deficit. But because of the way we budget, that screen reflects a negative general fund balance of $487,000. And if you compare that to the budget we approved last year, it's down by $80,000. So we're actually starting off this evening in a better position than we were last year. And the other thing that I'd draw your attention to, the estimate for this fiscal year we're currently in. Now keep in mind, our fiscal year starts on December 1st and goes through November 30th. So when you look at the budget book and you see the amounts through June, that's 7 months, not 6 months. So keep that in mind as well. But we're looking at possibly finishing the general fund year over budget in the black. So we did okay. It's largely because of the work of Wendy and her staff and the elected and the department heads. We've cut back and cut back and cut back, and we really had a scary year last year because of COVID, and it didn't come to fruition. So we're starting the year what I feel is a comfortable place. And I used to be out there taking pot shots at Tim and everybody else because I was the one that was against the budget. But I'm of the opinion right now, $487,000, that's something we can live with. We've taken contingency out of that number because I'm also of the opinion that if we have an emergency that requires contingency funds, that's rainy day funds. So I'm okay if we have a whatever happens and we have to take $1 million out of the bank to meet the expenditures. That's what a rainy day fund is for. So that number up there is taking out all of the spurious stuff that really confuses people, makes the numbers far more off than they have to be, 90% off, and brings it into line. Does anybody have any questions about this sheet? Mr. Harris?
Yes, so we're 487,000. That leaves 3.8 million on the negative side. Are those dollars going to be covered? How are we going to get the revenue to cover those? Or
Yeah, Mike, about $1.5 million of that is contingency, so that we don't plan on using. The rest of that number is largely capital projects that have already been kind of pulled out of the fund balance in prior years. We reserved, was it $5.5 million of fund balance several years ago to cover these capital projects. So those are basically already funded through the fund balance.
100% of this 3.8 is covered one way or another. We've held the dollars back.
Well, outside of contingency. And in contingency, we do have enough in the fund balance to cover that should we use it.
All right, thank you.
Other questions? Now keep in mind tonight, the general fund budget has 5 new full-time positions in it. That's what this number. One of those is the maintenance position we approved at the last meeting. 4 of those positions are directed by the courts for, and I'm gonna say this wrong, Mr. Stewart or Michael, so correct me, what guardian ad litem that we have to, for the juvenile system. So that's gonna affect the state's attorney's office with 2 employees, the public defender's office with 1 employee, and probation with 1 employee. So even with those additions, we're still at 487,000 in the red. Mr. Harris?
Will that bring any
additional revenue in?
I can't answer that. Can anybody answer that?
Just for the question.
asked if that would bring any more revenue in, these positions and the guardian ad items for the juvenile system, would that bring more revenue?
No, not for the juvenile court.
It's just a sign of the time, folks. We're seeing more and more juveniles involved in the system, and we're paying the price. And it's really beyond anybody's control. Okay, for the newbies in the room, the budget book is the document that we're working from tonight. Everybody should have, it should say tentative budget, so we're working off the same side. If you turn, and those old timers here, forgive me, but I'm gonna digress a minute to help the newbies out. If you turn to page 34, this is the expense side. This happens to be Mr. Hobson's budget. I picked that for a reason. So if you look across that page, 34 is what I'm looking at, the top of the page. Whole bunch of numbers, whole bunch of things. First line you need to after the account title is the full-time equivalency in 21, that's the current budget year. Full-time equivalency in 22. Then you move across the line and you've got 5 years worth of actual budget numbers. And then you have last year's budget and what it was amended to. So the FY 2021 budget was the original one. The one column to the right of that is what we approved last year. The next one over is the year-to-date expenditures as of June 20, is that 28? Yeah, 21. That's 7 months into the calendar year. Yeah, you could take a calculator and divide it by 7, multiply by 12, see how you come out, but it's not always a good judge. The next line, we're talking about the second one from the right-hand side, is what the department asked for in the initial meetings. And the final category, the column on the right, is the one we're working from tonight. That is what the Finance Committee approved for budget. So that's the approved number as we're sitting here tonight. Remember, we operate in a county where the subcommittees generally do the work and the board kind of approves it. I say that just to remind everybody that Finance Committee has looked at this 3 times and we've hit it hard 3 times. I say that, but I also say that we go over this budget a number of times because every county board member has the right to weigh in on this budget. The budget is probably the single most important thing we do as a county board. So if you have questions you want to talk about, please bring them up. So the way we're going to proceed is I'm going to have Wendy go through the revenues in just a second, but we're going to throw out, I'm going to open up this packet. I'm going to ask for a motion if you get this packet on the floor. The motion will be to approve everything in the right-hand column. There's going to be some amendments that I'm going to have to make because there's always amendments we have to make. We'll talk about those next. And then we'll go through the departments, department by department. I don't particularly want to go through line by line because I don't want to be here till midnight. But we're going to go through the departments. If there is something you want to change, you would need to make a motion to amend that particular line item and have it properly seconded. We'll discuss it and we'll vote on that amendment. I don't want to have a bunch of amendments sitting out here. We've got 10 amendments sitting here and, well, I like number 1, but I don't like number 2. I want to vote on the amendments as we go through them. So we're talking about Mr. Hobson's budget. We're not going to vote on it after we talk about Wendy's budget. We're going to talk about, we're going to vote on it while we're talking about Mr. Hobson's budget. Questions on that? Okay, to finish up the budget overview, Craig or Wendy, did I miss anything that you wanted to discuss?
No, I didn't see that.
Any questions on the budget overview? Okay, hearing none, can I get a motion to open the general fund? Mr. Crawford?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the FY 2022 Tazewell County General Fund.
Got a motion and a second. Second by Mr. Atkins. Okay, here comes the discussion. We're Yeah, we're gonna hit the revenues first, so revenue starts on page
28.
28.
So this would be just your general fund revenue, and I'm only going to point out the items that we have seen either kind of an increase or a decrease, so that you're kind of aware of what those would be. We are seeing, and major increases. If it's little, I'm not going to even touch it. So the retailer's public safety sales tax, that's up close to 400,000, 450. So we're seeing an increase in that coming through. I know the finance committee sees the reports that Treasurer Burris submits each year or each month, and we have definitely noticed an uptick in that, which is good for us. I will point out that negative $2 million is public safety. What we do is we earmark $2 million of those public safety sales tax dollars, and we put those towards IMRF and Social Security for the people that work in the sheriff's office. So just pointing that out, because it isn't typical to see a negative in your revenue. And then if you go to, we're kind of up in that consumption tax area. If you look at your sales tax reimbursement, that's just your usual sales taxes, we're up a little bit there as well, about 250,000. We did notice that sales tax, the state started collecting for online, and we are reaping the benefits of that. So that is part of what we think is driving that. The Illinois state income tax, we're thinking it's going to be up about 550 this year. So that's another one of those that is somewhat bigger item that I just want to point out. From a revenue standpoint, I think we're at a good point. I don't know that I've ever sat up here and been able to point out a number of things that were going up, so this is a first for me since I've been here back starting in 2015. So that's a positive. Going on down, I mean that covers most of the intergovernmental fees that you're going to see. Our licenses and permits are pretty much flat for the most part, everything that you're seeing there. So then we go down and you look at your charges for services, and those are, for the most part, I think that they're pretty flat. We do have one that we did discuss, and it was, I have to find the line item, and I apologize for that. And I don't know if I can find the line item for you. It may be, I may have it marked. So I had marked all of these in my other budget book, and what I realized is I didn't have that one marked here. But it is a, we went from, it's the county recorder recording fees. That's down about $250,000. And my understanding is that as we transfer those dollars, my understanding was when we cut the county clerk's budget, those dollars got moved and those fees went over to the fee fund. That's my understanding of that. Outside of that, everything else is looking pretty flat in the most part for those kind of funds. Our interest is down, if you notice that. We have, which I'm sure you all understand because interest is down for everybody. So that would be, you would see kind of quite a difference from $150 down to $16,000. And then the only other thing that we would have that would be major in terms of the miscellaneous is proceeds of debt. We aren't doing anything with proceeds of debt, so it's 1.7, so we have nothing this year. So that is that decrease there. Those are our big revenue items that kind of have shifted. For the most part, everything else has stayed relatively stable. But those are those items that have either gone up or down that I wanted to point out.
Any questions regarding revenue? Mr. Atkins?
I noticed that we have in our table, I think everyone has this, the FY 2022 final budget amendments that has a variety of changes with regards to expenditures. Do we have anything like that for revenue, or are the numbers in the tentative budget complete and accurate? There's no need for any changes in revenue projections.
There's no need for any changes. There's no need for any changes.
Okay.
Unless you're going to donate $1 million to the county, we'll put it in. Ms. Darcy?
Okay, regarding the item that Wendy mentioned, the county recorder recording fees, and I don't know where you wanna look at this, but,
I was gonna do it in his budget.
okay, I just wanna I don't want us to forget, I wanna follow through and find where that's at, that's all, thanks.
Mr. Hunt,
Did you mention the circuit clerk fees being markedly down from budget estimate? That's under charges for services.
you talking
Oh,
about,
you're talking about the actual estimated expenses?
Well, the budget from actual 2020 was over $1 million, and then budget 21 was under $1 million, and the estimated 21 is only 700,000.
the courts were shut down because of COVID during that time frame.
Okay, for 21.
Yes.
Okay.
And we're looking at, as a side note, we're looking at getting those funds, using rescue plan money to reimburse those funds. Other questions on revenue? Mr. Crawford?
It's not a question, but I just wanted, since I can appreciate us dedicating some time to revenue before we get into the expense budget. But the history, what always has been a good fiscal strategy for Tazewell County for many years, it's one of the reasons why we're known throughout the state as having a very good fiscal management and a low tax rate. Is because on purpose, the external auditors and the internal auditors, and now I assume the finance department, had a strategy that we would always underestimate the revenue by about $300,000, and we'd overestimate appropriations by about $700,000, which means we'd end up with unexpended appropriations. And the reason we did that is so there'd be $1 million, not so we'd be a target of National Taxpayers United that they come in and try to take our money. It's so there's a period of time that Mary knows well, before the first installment of taxes comes in, that you've still got to operate Tazewell County, all the departments in the general fund and all of the, and to fund it before the money's here. So it's really important to budget that way. It's fiscally conservative to do it that way so that you have money to do business and you're not forced to go out and borrow money. Thank you.
The other thing I wanted to point out, and it's something to keep in mind as we go through this budget, if you flip back to page 27, and we've gone through the revenues now, but what I do want to point out is those fund balance amounts. So at the very bottom of the page, you will see the ending balance as a percentage of projected expenses. So that means we have 54% fund balance at the end of this budget to pay our funds. So what they typically say is they want you to have 33%, and we are at the 54%. And we've always kind of stayed in that area. We've tried to stay at like 50% for the general fund. We're not required to, because this fund is not supported only by property taxes, but it is kind of that sound financial way to handle your expenses, because as we've seen in the past, sometimes the state will withhold money, or we had a time period where it was about 5 months before we got some of our sales tax dollars, and so that does put that pressure and crunch on the treasurer's office to try to pay those bills. So those fund balances are another area that I'm always focused on, because that does matter whenever we look at the overall budget. Not saying that we should be dipping into basically our fund balance, and which I consider our savings, but the other piece of that you need to consider is this ending balance as a percentage of projected expense.
Any other questions on revenue? So at the bottom of page 33, we are estimating revenue for this budget, $27,771,033. Okay with everybody? Hearing no response, we're moving on. So you have in your packets a packet that looks like this, and Mr. Atkins alluded to it earlier. It's the items that we need to amend before going any further throughout the budget. Everybody have that document? Mr. Harris, you do not have that document? I think it was passed out tonight. Okay. So most of these changes are for changes in medical insurance, social security, adjustments to the contingency to take into account of that. Couple other ones in there, the courthouse electrical project is a big one. Can I get a motion to approve page 1 as an amendment to the budget? Mr. Atkins, second by Ms. Braille. Discussion. Wendy, you want to kind of explain it? Or explain?
So for medical insurance, we got our new numbers, and if you were at the board meeting, you heard me say that the renewal came in lower than what I had put in the budget. So I had to go back through and figure out what these medical insurance lines should be. So you will see a decrease or an increase in some cases, and that's only because these are based on what people are taking, like what they select for insurance. So, like the state's attorney's budget had to go up, but that's just because it's an information that I'm fed from payroll, and then I figure out what those premiums would be based on where we sit right now. So those numbers can fluctuate. So you'll see there's a number, I hit basically, I think, every department in the county general fund. Mostly we took it down. The overall savings was about $155,000. So when I took all of that into consideration. Then if you pop down to, so you get through all of those, and then you come to, it's page 70, County Administration, Human Resources, and that one is going up $2,995. We did hire an HR director. In order to get someone to accept the job, we had to pay more than the minimum of the grade. So that went through Chairman Zimmerman. He approved that, which is the method that we typically use whenever anything like that happens. With that also comes the Social Security and IMRF. You'll see another little piece of that because the HR director is paid partly out of risk because they're keeping us from basically having some issues with if we don't handle things appropriately from an HR perspective. So there is another piece of that you'll see later. The mandated election mailings, those would be that we have to mail, and if I'm wrong, John will help me. We have to send an application to every registered voter for both of the elections, correct, John? So Treasurer Burris got this information. She, as strange as this is, it resides in my budget. Mary does the postage, and all of it comes from the county clerk. No, I'm just kidding. No, but a lot of the stuff does come from the county clerk, especially as we're having to mail these out. So we had to adjust that. It wasn't something any of us actually wanted to do. So then you would pop down to adjustments. I'm asking to take of that $155,000 and take $125,000 of it and put it into the adjustments line, because we did just approve 5 new employees, and depending on what they select, we're going to have to pay for it, but I just don't know what they're going to select. So then that will let me, at the end of the year, true up that number, go in, look at what everybody had, and make sure everybody's budgets are okay to cover their medical insurance. So that would be what that piece is. It's that piece sits in at the adjustments line. I have to ask for a transfer from all of you if we transfer any of the dollars out of there, so just so you know, you're still in control of those dollars. Contingency changed because of the changes within this budget. I'll have Craig talk about the management supervisor piece, because he worked with, I believe, Teresa on these numbers, so they met. I was not there. So I'll let him talk about that, but I'll quickly say the last one that I will talk about is this building improvements, which is the courthouse electrical project. We've had delays. Mike Shoney has come up to property, and he's told you guys they're having a hard time getting some of the materials. So it's not that we're not aware of it, but what this is going to do is it's going to push these dollars into next year's budget. So they won't be spent this year, but we'll have to spend them next year, so we need to appropriate those dollars for this coming budget. And Craig, if you would address those others.
Yeah, the other was just a classification of an employee that was in the management supervisor line, and the employee has no management or supervisor responsibilities. So we moved that person down to support staff. It was just basically moving $37,000 of salary from one line to another.
And then the board of review, what was that one? Was the data entry area, just keying it in?
Yeah, I have fat fingers and I put in a 9 instead of a 6.
And one other comment before I go to Mr. Atkins. This document, while we haven't approved these changes, this document includes those changes, is that correct? Okay, so we're actually raising this by $343,000, but that's taken into account on this. Okay? Mr. Atkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question that I have, I know when we were in finance looking at this budget, we knew that there were gonna be a lot of these, medical insurance changes. And because of the fact that we have time constraints for when we have to pass a budget, we went ahead and passed it with rougher numbers than what we now have. So the question I have is, do we believe that the medical insurance information now is totally accurate, or should we expect that there will still be a little bit more tweaking for the final budget?
No, you're set. When you approved the premiums just a week ago, that number is solid. So that is a positive. It was one of the best renewals that I've ever had. So that was great. That was my positive. And I brought you the risk management, which wasn't.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Finance Chairman. I've got 3 issues, real quick. One is, on county administration, human resources. Wendy, I heard your explanation, I understand it, I think. But my question is, was there any thought to taking the $29.95, instead of increasing the salary, treat it as a signing bonus, so that they get the same money that they wanted, but then in out years, it would be based on the salary, and any increases they got or merit they got would be based on the salary that we had originally budgeted. So it's a way to have the new person feel good, but it's also helps us fiscally. Any thought to doing that?
Well, we didn't. No, we didn't. I can say the person.
Mr. Chairman Zimmerman, are we crossing the line into talking about a specific individual's pay that we need to be concerned about?
I'm not talking about a specific, I'm asking a question about the way we approached a personnel line item in the budget that we increased to 995. I just want to know, was there any thought? I don't care about who it is or what they is, whether, in fact, I agree that they deserve it. I'm just saying, was there any thought to doing that? And if there wasn't, that's okay, I'm still for it, but I would like in the future us to consider treating those things like signing bonuses if we're gonna increase that rather than just raise the salary. Okay, second thing, Mr. Chairman, if I continue, on postage and shipping, which is an increase of 102, 120, well, I'm like everybody else on the board, not happy about this, but I want everybody to know what this is. This isn't Mr. Ackerman waking up from a dream saying, gee, I'd like to send 2 more mailings in 2022. It's the Illinois General Assembly once again forcing us to spend money, and we call that an unfunded mandate. And I am sick and tired of it, and here we have another, I mean, they never stop. Every day they meet, they do this. Third thing is building improvements on the courthouse electrical project delays. I'm all for that too, and Wendy, I think I listened carefully to your explanation. That's almost $250,000. Give $500 and some dollars. So you said some of that, I thought I heard you say, I'm not sure. Some of that was budgeted in 2021, this current fiscal year, that we did not spend. And so then, you know, obviously we have to reappropriate it. My question is, how much of that $250,000 was appropriated as an unspent money in 2021, the current budget? Do we know?
It would be all of it.
Oh,
It would be-
good.
So all it is expense that we were going to have, we would have much preferred to have it in 21, but we're not.
No,
And
good.
so what I told Mike Shoney is we need to make sure that's in the budget, or it's going to reduce the capital projects he can do next year, which he's already kind of.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that ends my comments or my questions, and I support all these.
Any other questions or comments on this motion to amend? Okay, the motion on the floor is to amend these line items, total change for the budget, $343,078. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The amendments have carried. Okay, moving into the, individual lines. Back on page 34 and 35, the county clerk, the circuit clerk, right clerk here. I talked about some of these earlier, just to go on a couple other things, and again, finance has looked at these. You'll notice there's a change in full-time equivalencies from 1 to 4 in exempt personnel. That was made, and it was fully explained to the budget committee. The circuit clerk was advised to move people out of fee funds and move software into fee funds. So if you would look down at the bottom of page 34, there's a contractual line item that almost matches the difference between the change in exempt. Essentially, you move the personnel out of the fee fund and put software in the fee fund. So there's no change in total employees. There's change in the general fund of total employees. A couple other points I want to make out. We also this year have a new accounting software system, as everyone is aware of. We tried to break out some of the expenditures so that it could be tracked better. So you will see some years that have 0 expenditures, and in this year we're moving things around. There's nothing on Link's budget that I can point to show you that. But the zeros across there on where it says training and location, those were all, we created special line items so we can track that. So if a board member asks, or anybody asks, how much are you paying for airfare to send people to conferences? Before we couldn't track that. Now we can. So you will see some changes throughout the budget where one line was broken up. Maybe $10,000 was in a line and it was split up over 3 more lines. It's still $10,000, but it was split. So you will see that throughout the budget as well. Have I confused everybody yet? No. I'll keep trying. Any questions on the circuit clerk budget? Cut it by 50%, Lane, is that what you said? What? Moving on, jury commission. I'm gonna go fast unless you stop me. Questions on jury commission, page 36. State's attorney, 38. Ms. Darcy.
Just want to make sure I understand this correctly. For administrative personnel, there's no change in FTEs, but the cost of that is increasing by about $40,000. So, am I reading that right?
I think you're right. I think I know the answer, but if I'm wrong, Stuart, please tell me. You're filling an unfilled position, is that correct?
Right, we tried to get by without that through a retirement, but we don't need to fill it now.
Other questions concerning state's attorney? Page 41, public defenders. Page 43, courts. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Lori Shelton here with courts. On page 44, the second item, specialty courts, to carry over
you're asking the board to change line 100-130-5254 specialty court from 0 to $14,100, essentially what was last year's budget.
Yes, that's specialty court, which is like mental health court.
Okay. Is there a motion to do that? Mr. Sin, Mr. Hovey, discussion. Mr. Harris.
Why was it changed to 0?
I'm not sure why it came in at 0. When I just went over this, I noticed it was 0 instead of the 14,100. I don't know if it just was it added in or what?
Mr. Atkins.
I think this sounds like it's just an accident, but I'm curious, what is the 14,100 for?
Specialty court is like our mental health court, that the judges do. They have, on Wednesday, they have drug court, and then they have mental health court. And this is, a program for people who have mental health issues and they are put into, like the drug court program, they pretty much make a lifestyle change to, get out of this constant, getting felonies and, being in the court system and try to, work with all these groups and, counselors and such too.
If I could, I think maybe my question was bad. I understand what the specialty courts are, and I've worked in some of them. They're a great program. I think that we definitely should support them. But what I'm looking at is this additional mailings to people? Is this paying for someone to keep track of those cases specially and grant writing? And that's what I want is not the big picture, but exactly where is this money going when it's paid out to someone?
A good example is like Caswood. They have counselors that work with these individuals, and of course we are billed, for that. And that is for the mental health, I don't want to say patients, patrons that are in mental health, that's a fee that we pay Caswood out of. There are sometimes, they have to, Luke, help me out.
Sure, and you're doing a good job. One of the conditions of them joining the specialty court is that they sign up for state insurance. But sometimes there's a gap in treatment between when we get them signed up and when the state starts covering their treatment. So we've got 50 people in drug court and close to 20 people in mental health court. And obviously it's rotating, new people come in, old people graduate or are withdrawn. And I think these are some of the funds that we do use to pay for that treatment until they can get on the state insurance. But also there is, the legislature added drug court fee on almost all felony cases, probably 3, 4, maybe even 5 years ago, where there is, I think on every generic felony case, it's about might only be a $5 fee, it could be as much as $25, but there is revenue coming in from that. I don't know if that money ends up on this budget line or not. I don't know. Can't help out on that.
That satisfies me, Mr. Chairman.
Just looking at this, okay, just correct me if I'm wrong, the fiscal year 2021 budget was 103.9, and the estimated is far under that, it's 60,527. Are they requesting less than that for fiscal year 2022, and we're budgeting 111,800? I don't understand how this divvied up.
I mean, I'd have to ask the courts to really answer this one, but my guess is that a lot of these programs, again, were shut down for 3-4 months out of the year when we were all locked down and couldn't go anywhere. But I don't know that for sure.
It is one of those things where, as Luke said, we don't always know how much our bills vary in amounts every month, you know, from like Taswood and some of those places. And it, I mean, there's some months it can be $1,200, and there's some months it can be $600, and there's just never a way to know from one month to the next what we're going to be faced with.
And if I'm sorry.
But they requested without that 14,000 in there, at zero balance, they still only requested close to 52,000, and we budgeted for them 111,000.
They came back with another request for attorney fees that weren't included, I believe, that were approved. So so that very first one is what they came, and then at the budget meeting, some people brought additional changes to those meetings. And I believe attorney fees were adjusted at the committee level, so that's what you're seeing. So what I think happened is those two items were missed, attorney fees and specialty court. I think they caught the attorney fees, and I think tonight or who knows when, but she, you know, brought it to us tonight to say, oh, we need to get the specialty court in there as well.
So are we adding that to the $111,800?
The 14,000 would be added to that.
Added to that,
Yes, it would.
even though they only requested 51,800.
So originally they requested 51,000. At one of the meetings, in one of these 3 budget meetings, they came back. So this is the very first meeting, this fiscal year 22 department. That is what people submit the budget to Craig. Craig gets all those changes in and he presents it to the board. But in between the time that he does that, and we have that first meeting, some people find changes, especially this year, because we had a new accounting system. We asked everybody to really look these over because they needed to be checking their budgets because there's so much change. So at one of those meetings, they brought forward that the attorney fees were missed. What I think happened is they didn't notice that the specialty court fee was missed as well. So that's where it looks like the committee's just saying this, but the committee doesn't just up their budget. Anything in that fiscal year 22 budget line is requested by those actual departments, and then the committee voted on it, yes or no.
Mr. Crawford.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you because some department heads don't come to tentative budget and point this out, and then all of a sudden we start the fiscal year and they come into finance for a transfer, and just that's not what transfers are supposed to be for. So I really appreciate that, and I also point out to everybody in the room that this young lady has not only been here tonight, but she sat through all the budget subcommittees as well. And so I appreciate that. Let me ask this question. Is anybody in the room, because we've really got a well-represented criminal justice system group here tonight. Does anybody know what the 14-1 is for sure? Okay, so.
I think they like cake from that.
Yeah, so it could have been a fat finger, right? Because we've pointed that out as a cause to some of these things before. The last thing I want to say is what I thought it was, and I never said anything because I thought it was related, and I just want the criminal justice representatives, state's attorney, courts, public defender, to tell me, no, you're wrong, Russ. I thought it was, yeah, you would, yeah. Anyway, I assumed that because of the personnel we added in each of your budgets, because of the court's a new approach, that therefore we didn't need that. And I never said anything, but that was my assumption, so I assume that assumption.
That would be wrong.
That was wrong, thank you.
Mr. Harris?
I'd like to, make the motion to amend the budget and add the 14-1.
That motion's on the floor already.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chubby? Any other discussion? Mr. Mingus?
Yes, I'll be abstaining due to my affiliation with Castle.
So noted. So the motion on the floor is to amend line 130-5254 from 0 to $14,100. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Any other changes to courts? Moving on then to page 45, court services. Page 47, probation upgrade. Page 49, court security. Page 50, the big one, sheriff. Page 53, EMA. Page 56, coroner. Page 58, community development. Page 61, county board. Page 63, county auditor. Page 65, county clerk, recorder, Mr. Harris.
Yeah, I have a few issues on this, and I'm expressing to the finance committee. The first one is $250,000 was removed from the general fund by the county clerk to a fee fund. And we were told that expenses of $250,000 were also moved out. I don't see in the clerk's budget where it was reduced by $250,000. I don't see in the fee funds where the $250,000 was added as a revenue source. That's one item. Don't understand. The second one is, the revenue, or the fee funds, the revenue not shown. You raised the recorder's fees, he's got the $250,000, that's not shown in any estimate for next year. I don't understand that. And then the last issue is, there was a letter written by the clerk on September 9th that we want to spend $148,000 to upgrade ADA compliant model voting booths. And we were told that a question was asked, is there any other option, single booth or anything like that? And we were told that there was no other options. So I went home, got online, and the first site I went to, I found 16 different models. The first site opened of single voting booths. And they were $200 each instead of $900. So the $900 one contains one ADA booth and 3 regular booths. It's a round table. So we're spending $148,000, $500 to get $37
$37,000 worth of ADA, and I oppose it. And I want to, take out the ADA dollars we put in it for this year and stop the program until we get this straightened out. So those are the three issues I have. And I'm not going to vote for this budget.
John, would you like to address these first two items?